I'm Harris Strokoff. I'm a psychiatrist. I work at NCSS. I also work in South Burlington. I've been with NCSS. I started at NCSS, probably close to 20 years ago. It was my first job out of training. I trained at Dartmouth Hitchcock, where I did residency and fellowship. Worked at NCSS, loved it, and then my life, aka my wife, took us out to California for a few years, and then we came back, and it's been a great fortune to me to be able to work at NCSS as a psychiatrist and acting medical director for these last number of years. So as a psychiatrist, I'm a psychiatrist that treats children, adolescents, and adults. I've been doing this for 20 years. And I can tell you it's been an interesting time to do this, because one thing that's really happened over the course of this last 20 years is really the advent of the hyper-digital age, if you will. And I feel like I've in many ways had a first-hand seat to watch, kind of how that has impacted specifically child development and adult development. And so that's, and kind of seeing that's what made me want to talk to, schools and communities like this, and just basically about what I'm seeing, and really just to have conversations. And I'm not going to pretend to have, all the answers or anything, but I feel like if I can just share things I've learned from doing this job, and also being a parent. I have a 10 and 12-year-old at home, and so parenting in this digital age, which is incredibly difficult. So that's kind of why I'm here. So things we're going to talk about today are right on here. This is a great slide. I did not make it, but whoever made it did an awesome job. We're going to talk about the impacts of internet, gaming, and social media addiction on children's mental health, and also impact sometimes on suicide risk. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're in a circle, which is awesome. I want this to be super informal. I want to make sure we have time for questions, but also questions along the way are extremely welcome. So here it goes. Okay. So social media. What is social media? Some of the things we think about when we think about social media, we think about Facebook. They kind of started social media, if you will. Other social media is Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok. There are many, many more. Included on here are video games as well. Video games are a way that children, communicate with each other, play with each other. Those two things are good things. And unfortunately, they can be a way where kids avoid, and adults sometimes avoid, other necessary productive things like human interaction, like real life human interaction, exercise, etc. And unfortunately, much like with these other social media venues, video games are a way that kids can sometimes be ostracized, bullied as well. And so if you have a child or grandchild and they're playing video games a lot, it's important to ask, okay, well, who are you playing with? What are these kids like? Because now video games are connected with others oftentimes. A note about TikTok, and this is something, and TikTok to a degree, but for those of you who may be following in the news, there's talk about banning TikTok in our country. And one interesting thing to note about TikTok, which is my understanding, is that TikTok in our country is actually different than TikTok in other countries. In other words, take China, for instance, which we're not taking lessons from other countries, but in China, apparently, kids are able to access educational things on TikTok, things like that maybe they can learn from, and they're not able to access things that maybe don't have educational value or kind of holistic value, if you will. That's obviously not the case here. Here, our children can access all sorts of things, whether it be useful and productive, which there are obviously useful and productive things, in media, but also some things that can be terrifying, some things that can be that can be inappropriate. Okay, so I have some links in here, just mainly, I'm not gonna click on all of them because it would just take too long, but I include them in here in case people want these slides and they can take a look at them themselves. But this is from the Cleveland Clinic, which is a preeminent medical institution, and this is from their definition of internet gaming disorder, which is in the DSM-5. It's basically when people become addicted to the internet or gaming and what it means. And so I'll just read it here. Video game addiction or internet gaming disorder, characterized by severely reduced control over gaming habits, resulting in negative impacts on daily functioning, including personal, social, educational, and occupational responsibilities. So what I've found as a psychiatrist, as a doctor, I've treated a lot of addiction. I've treated a lot of alcohol abuse, alcohol dependence, opiate abuse, opiate dependence. And what's interesting about internet gaming disorder, it's very similar to compulsive gambling, is that you see the same things that you see when people are addicted to drugs and alcohol. For instance, you see making excuses. Oh, I'll just play, for another few more hours. I'll get to my homework later. I'll call in sick just because I need a mental health day, and I'll play games all day. You see not being able to stop even when you want to. Nope, that's it. I'm done. I'm going to stop playing this game. Oh no, wait, I'm dragged in. I'm going to play more. You see, even when there are severe consequences, an inability to stop. And so you see withdrawal. For those of you who have children or grandchildren, if they've gotten deep into internet or gaming or social media, you take it away, there can be really severe emotional withdrawal. We see it at NCSS all the time. If there's anyone here on the crisis team, we know that oftentimes, like taking away a phone can lead to physical aggression in kids that are severely dependent. So just wanted to point that out, that if you feel like you're asking yourself, is my child, is my grandchild, or is maybe my adult child or spouse addicted to the internet, addicted to games, it can be real. And let's face it, there are, for those of you that have been to San Francisco, I used to live there. Silicon Valley has a lot of very expensive real estate. People can afford that real estate because they've been developing these games to be addictive. All right, so I think I touched on these here. All right, phones and tablets. That is, I found in kind of working with, so as a child psychiatrist, I work with a lot of parents. As educators, you work with a lot of parents. This tends to be the common day battleground, if you will. Back in our day, there was a host of things that parents could do to help try and incentivize positive behaviors in their kids. Hey, if you want to go to the mall this weekend, you need to do your homework, you need to do your chores. If you want to go to football practice, you need to take care of business. Nowadays, for a growing number of kids, all that matters is access to these, because these will light up their brains more than anything else. This is a blessing and a curse. The curse we're going to talk about a lot today. The blessing is we don't need to spend time, say, in a therapy session thinking about, well, what can we use as a reward to kind of maybe help with pro-social behavior? The answer is, if someone does typically have use to these, having that be the reward is helpful. And what that means, though, is it means that the parent needs to be able to not give it to them and stand by that. Another very important thing that we're going to get to also is, at what age is it appropriate for kids to have access to social media devices? And there's a growing amount of literature, research that's showing that the answer tends to be hold out as long as you can, use as low doses as you can, with as little connection to the internet as you can, and especially not providing unsupervised use of the internet. I remember during my kids' orientation I used to do our orientation to our kids entering elementary school. We had a teacher tell us this stuff with me, look, when it comes to the internet, one thing you need to remember is that it's impossible for your children to unsee things. And think about everything that's accessible on the internet. You type in this word, that word, sometimes you type in a misspelling of something and what comes up. These are things that, especially in developing brains and minds and identities, can play a big role. All right, so I talk a lot about education as well. I have a lot of friends and colleagues that are teachers. I'm very invested in my kids' education, and we're going to talk about different ways that basically internet screen addiction impacts learning and education. Obviously, time spent watching cat videos is time not spent doing homework. In addition to that, this is a link to a study done by University of Chicago, where they found that even if a student, like say they had a student, they had them take tests, see how they did on like time tests, and then those same students put their phone on their desk, even if it was off, even if they didn't touch it, it took their attention away from their task, because they're looking at it, they're thinking about who might be texting, who isn't texting, and it was just a really good example of how even a phone that's off can interfere with learning. And then obviously, I don't think I need to tell anyone in this room, we know a phone that's on interferes with everything. Having a phone that's on, we are not, yes, we all can multitask, but when we're really trying to learn and be engaged, it's impossible. And I know that I've no idea how things are in your school district. I know that in other school districts, including where my kids have been, there's been a fair amount of Chromebook usage, like as a learning tool, and talking to educators and parents. There's also a lot of issues with kids not being present because they're somewhere on the Chromebook they shouldn't be, and so that's also something that I think I may have a slide about this. I know the state of Vermont right now is considering a bill limiting phones and tablets, and I think even Chromebooks in the classroom. I personally am all for that. I feel like the potential risks are outweighed by the potential benefits of not having them. So another thing I want to talk about is what I call the night before effect. You can probably guess what that is. I've seen it time and time again as a psychiatrist. Kids come to my office. Why is this child here? Well, they're really struggling emotionally. I think they're depressed. I think they're struggling with anxiety. They have ADHD. They can't function. They're having behavioral problems. They're really sad. And maybe I'll ask, oh, how's sleep? Oh, yes, sleep's kind of poor. Then oftentimes I'll talk to the child or teen alone, and I'll be like, okay, so what I like to ask is, what do you do when you can't sleep? And the answer oftentimes is, oh, I go on my Chromebook. And what do you do? Oh, I play these games with these people in Nevada. It's awesome. And they're doing this after their parents go to sleep for who knows how long. And school's hard enough. Imagine trying to function when you've lost 4 hours of sleep a night, because that's when your friends in Nevada are playing these games. And so oftentimes when parents learn this and then they're able to lock down devices, and when I say lock down, I mean that's necessary. I mean, kids will find kids are very resourceful. They'll find the old iPhone that the parents forgot they didn't have. It's still connected to Wi-Fi, and they'll be doing stuff on that. But when that's corrected, we oftentimes see great turnarounds. All right. Yeah, so I alluded to these things, night before effect. This is just impact on mood and social development. There's things that are just really important for human development: interpersonal connection, exercise, being grounded, to our senses, to the earth, to nature, being able to be focused, being able to use our imagination is extremely. These are all things that we know are linked to positive development. And in kids and adults where, internet use is way too much. It's interfering developmentally, I believe. There's also physical health risks. We know that number of hours spent online or watching television or playing video games or on tablets can be linked to health consequences such as obesity, overeating. Sometimes that can lead to I just gave an example here, sleep apnea. For those of you who don't know, sleep apnea is a condition where even though you're maybe sleeping 8 to 10 hours a night, your body isn't getting oxygenated enough to where it's restful sleep. You don't get into the same sleep rhythms, and it can then impact mood, attention, and behavior the next day.
You said too much. Do you have a threshold of what you think is appropriate? And I'm guessing it varies per baby.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So you asked, what is too much internet use? You're right, it varies. I mean, most people agree that when a child is really young, the best answer is 0. It's hard to find a pediatrician that thinks that it's good to have kids under 2, exposed to screens. After that, I think it's trying to keep it really minimal. I mean, I think it was in my last slide, I kind of mentioned the hours in the day effect. And the key, I think, as parents is, what do we want our kids exposed to? You're an athlete. Like, sports are important to you, I could imagine. They were important to me. I think they're important to many kids. But for many kids, it isn't sports. It's music. For maybe volunteering, cooking. But having those passions where we get to use creativity, where we get to connect with other people, obviously school is extremely important, having time for homework. And so I call it the hours in a day effect. There are only so many hours in a day. And so if a teenager, for instance, is playing video games an hour a day and they're taking care of business, it's probably fine. If they're playing video games 6 hours a day and they're losing sleep, not. So I don't know if that answers your question. So it's my long way of saying that it is highly variable. So I want to turn it off. Hello? There we are. Okay, so when it comes to baby out of juice, yeah, it looks like it's low on batteries, but I can talk about this too. When it comes
Sorry, we're not too high tech up here.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
I prefer it without it. So here's the thing with phones. So one thing that is also clear is, and I know this because I have a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old, and neither of them have a phone. But I'll tell you what, they've been asking me when they could get phones for like 4 years. When can I get a phone? I heard my friend can get a phone when he's 10. I heard my friend get a phone when he's 11. That whole thing. And one thing that is important is for, and the answer to that question is similar to your question, is that, when's the age? I think the longer you can hold off, the better. Obviously, somebody your age is probably gonna have a phone. 6-year-old doesn't need a phone. And obviously there's different ways to go about it. But the issue with phones are what I discuss here. One is that it can create, the kids call it FOMO, fear of missing out. Phones and social media show kids things they weren't invited to, which really stinks. If I remember being a middle schooler, high schooler, and I wasn't invited to a lot of stuff, but I was not bombarded with pictures of my friends having a great time that I wasn't able to attend. Like, that's just torture. It really, really is. And so that's an example. We all have seen kids now that normally, like, in a free period, back in the day, kids would talk to each other, play with each other, and all too many times there's kids like this. It's literally interfering with those social interactions, and we know that social interactions, good and bad, help us learn how to handle social interactions as adults. I hope I'm wrong, But I think that we're going to look back at this time in history and be like, well, why was there such a great rise in disability amongst humans? I think that, screen use is going to play a role in that. I think that being able to be exposed to the good and the bad, the ups and downs of life, as a child, as a teen, is important, so that then we can handle those things maybe when we're entering the workforce and not be demoralized, and maybe we can stick with working longer than we otherwise could. Yeah. I also mentioned down here texting. We don't think about texting as social media, but that's another way where there's, I know, for instance, in my kid's school district, there was an issue where there were, all these like group texts that certain people were involved in. It's like in elementary school. Other kids weren't, created a lot of drama. People would talk badly about one group by another group. And then, and the other issue with these phones and, and texting is that then there's a permanent record for as long as there is history. One thing I always like to, when I'm in groups like this, I like to ask people, think about maybe the most embarrassing thing that ever happened to you in school or amongst peers. And now imagine, those of you that are young, maybe this did happen to you, but now imagine if that was recorded and shared with everyone you knew and people could access it the rest of their life. Like, that's a torture chamber.
Dr. Strokoff.
I just wanted to mention about, I'd say it was a good 10 to 12 years ago when our children started getting phones, and they weren't smartphones at the time. Even just having a flip phone was a big deal, but the minute that they got the smartphones, keeping them away from the dinner table, keeping them, we had to make rules about everything. Like, it became an enormous thing at the dinner table. This person's using it, that person's using it. Let's just get rid of them at the dinner table. It's like, oh, for goodness sake, somebody jumped in a pool with a phone in their pocket. It was the end of the world. It was just like everything became bigger. So whenever people ask me, my 10-year-old is looking for a phone. My daughter was 13 when she was given her first flip phone by her sister, because we had said no, but the sister gave it to her. And so then it was okay. It's like, oh my gosh, changed the whole dynamic of the family. And it wasn't for the better. It was harder. It was so much harder. And so now, they're starting even younger, so.
You're absolutely right. And, and one thing I'm always asked, or I'm oftentimes asked, especially like even just, not in professional environments, but even just like by other parents, like in my school, like, well, do I have to give my kid a phone because X or Y, because the other kids have it? And one is letting them know that, well, for one, not all the kids have it. Until you're much older. And then for sometimes it's like, well, they need it for communication. What about drop off and whatnot? I have no stock in the company Gab, which I think might be owned by Verizon, but they make a device called a Gab watch. There's also a company that makes a Gizmo watch. And basically what those are, thank you. Basically what those are they're phones, they're watch phones that you cannot access the internet on, you cannot access social media on, and you can only call or text your parents or numbers that your parents allow for. So if there's anyone listening here who's like, well, I'm kind of hesitant to get my kid a smartphone, but I know like I want to be able to talk to them about after school plans or let them go skiing and know where to meet up, those can be a good option. I'll take the cue here and wet my whistle. Okay, so I think this is one where I do want to click on the link. Yeah, I think so. Let's see. See if it works. This is good timing because you just brought this up. So this is a graph that basically shows the percentage of U.S. high school students who felt sad or hopeless or had suicidal thoughts in the last year. And this is a graph from 1999 to 2021. People look at this graph oftentimes and they think, oh, that must be COVID. It is actually well before COVID that we started to see this increase. And if you look at, if you notice, from 1999 to about 2007, 2008, both for sad or hopeless and suicidal thoughts, we're doing pretty good. You know, it's like high school students were generally feeling better about themselves, and then something happened. What happened is, if you think back, iPhone came about around, or really started getting popular around 2009, and then you look at, 20, don't quote me on the dates here, but Facebook, and you can see what happened. And we know that, for instance, one statistic that is well known is suicidality in teenage girls, and teenage boys too, but teenage girls even more so, has drastically been increasing in recent years. And many of us feel that social media is a big reason why. Comparison to other people, just the degree of the bullying that can take place, etc. Yep. Okay. So I'm not going to click on this link, but basically one thing that happened right around a year ago is the United States Surgeon General put out an advisory on social media use, which they don't do this all the time, these Surgeon Generals. So it's actually a really big deal. And I'll just leave this up here, and I'll read it. The most common questions parents ask me is social media safe for my kids? The answer is that we don't have enough evidence to say it's safe, and in fact, there's growing evidence that social media use is associated with harm to young people's mental health, said the U.S. Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy. Children are exposed to harmful content on social media, ranging from violent and sexual content to bullying and harassment. And for too many children, social media use is compromising their sleep and valuable in-person time with family and friends. We're in the middle of a national youth mental health crisis, and I'm concerned that social media is an important driver of that crisis, one that we must urgently address. So, so to me, that, before this came out, it's like, yeah, this is kind of what I'm seeing, it's what I think, but, but clearly, a lot of people are coming to the conclusion that, that there's significant impact on our society. Okay, as a psychiatrist, obviously I want to talk about, depression, anxiety, which obviously can be extremely debilitating and life-threatening in people. When people are deprived of the things that make life real and make life worth living, personal interaction, all the things that I mentioned, we can have, to a degree, what is existential depression. We're basically, kids, adults get to a certain point and they're like, well, what's my purpose? Because maybe their purpose for the last 6 years was winning that game, or just being online, eating, that's it. And then sometimes when people kind of come out of it, just like sometimes people come out of other addictions, like, oh gosh, well, I was using drug X, other people kind of progressed and got a job, and that can lead to and worsen severe depression. Okay, so just wanted to, I welcome any questions about this, but I don't need to tell parents and people who work at a school how important it is to screen for depression. It's always important to check in with our younger people and with our older people, make sure that everyone's doing okay. Some signs of depression, loss of interest in things, being more seclusive, less social, changes in hygiene, sleep issues, overwhelming guilt, low energy, poor performance, typically in school, but also could be work. I always recommend an open dialogue. One thing that I was taught in my first day of psychiatry school, if you will, is asking about suicide does not increase the risk that it will not put an idea in someone's head. So asking, hey, have you ever like seriously thought about hurting yourself? Have you ever thought about taking your own life? It's critically important because people that do that, you know, treatment can help reverse it a huge percentage of the time.
Did you see a difference in anger at all? I haven't seen anger at all in there, but I know my sons both, they would get really angry at games if they didn't win them, or if they get to a certain point and they'd get like super frustrated and they start like cursing at the games and stuff. And this is when they were older in high school, not like younger, but you know, we set a time limit which seemed reasonable because they were young adults. They were, you know, 17, 18, 19, 20 years old. So we were like, well, okay, midnight, everything has to go off. And they didn't start until they got home from their, you know, after dinner or whatever. So we were like, you know, trying to give them some leeway, and inevitably at 1 o'clock in the morning, I'm awake because I can see the light around the door, you know, and I have to go in and be the mean person. And then everybody has an attitude toward me because they overstepped their boundary, you know, but they couldn't, they would just always push it, you know.
100%. We see anger a ton, and we see sometimes physical aggression.
Yeah.
You know, things can get really, really intense, as with any addiction. So, good point. All right, so what can we do? Well, the good news is that I feel like in most things in society, it's a pendulum, and the pendulum swung one way. I feel like things are getting more reasonable from what I can tell, amongst parents, amongst school districts, amongst governments. You know, there's, if you were to click on this article, it talks about you know, the digital divide in schools, and one of the first schools to ban, this is ironic, one of the first school districts to ban cell phone use and whatnot in the districts were in Silicon Valley, because the people that developed these technologies realized how addictive they were, and frankly realized that there were probably, yeah, there are like departments in these companies figuring out ways to grab the attention of teens even more so. And so certain schools went phone free, device free, paper pencil, and I can tell you, look, my kids go to school in South Burlington, and I was very pleased when right before my middle schooler started school, they said, hey, there was this free period, and I want you to know that starting this year, there's going to be no devices allowed in this free period. And I mentioned that I think currently right now the state of Vermont is considering technology standards for schools. I don't know I won't pretend to have read the law, the proposed bill or anything, but I think it's a step in the right direction personally. Yeah, the other thing too is just for us to model positive behavior. You know, I like most Americans have at times had an unhealthy relationship with my phone, as far as like, you know, like maybe start something like this. I'm gonna check the weather. Like, do I need to check the weather 20 times in a day? Maybe if the snow's coming, I'm scared. That might happen. But you know, do I want my kids seeing me constantly checking the weather or reading something or responding to a text message? And so I personally am practicing really trying to put my phone down for hours at a time and be present, and I'm hoping that I can model that to my kids. Let's see here. I kind of mentioned the Silicon Valley. I mentioned, you know, antidotes, not exactly an antidote, but, you know, making sure that our kids have access and are strongly encouraged, I won't use the word forced, strongly encouraged to experience the outdoors, be physically active, be active in the creative arts, you know, music, artistry, cooking, etc. Things that can give people other avenues for healthy pleasure.
It'll be interesting to see how far back the pendulum goes, because I have young adults raising toddlers right now who, when they were babies, they wouldn't even let there be a television in the room. They wouldn't even, they're 30-somethings, you know, and they won't even let their children watch TV. They spend a ton of time outside, but they've got both parents at home because they can work from home. So it's different than somebody that has to be, depends on your situation, of course.
Certainly. So, I included this in here. This is, I mentioned this already. The fact that they're considering federal legislation. And if you were to click on the link, you could see it. But it's a bill that would set the minimum age for social media users to 13 and require parental consent and stop the use of algorithms for teens under 18. And for those of you that are wondering what an algorithm is, I'm a psychiatrist. I'm not the best person to describe this. But basically what it is that these companies know, based on information they have on us, but also based on what we look at, if somebody's scrolling, when the scrolling stops, what the picture is, if we zoom in, if we push play, and then it feeds us more things to try to keep us on there longer. And so what this bill would say is that, you know what, you can't collect data and do that to people at least under the age of 18, which I think would be great.
There's a movie about that called The Social Dilemma.
Very good movie.
Have you seen it? Yeah, I thought it was excellent movie.
And I always like pointing out here that this is bipartisan legislation because obviously it's so hard for Democrats and Republicans to agree on much. The fact that a bunch agree on this tells you something, like that it's this is a thing that transcends political ideology. And these are just some quotes from two of the senators. Yeah, we talked about this. All right, and that's it. So I welcome, we talked about a lot of things, but you've offered some great examples. I welcome if anyone wants to share any examples they're seeing or have any questions for me about things that I've seen in my work. Any questions, comments?
Can you just offer some suggestions on how we can talk to our kids, because our son is 11 and he really, really wants a phone. And don't feel like he's ready yet, but since they like next year he'll be going to 7th grade, and it'd be nice that he could have one to be able to let us know when he's done practice. But how do we really communicate with him our concerns and also understand what he wants? Because again, all of his friends have phones. So how can we talk to him about that?
It's a great question, and I'm going through it myself. So right now with my kids who are 10 and 12. For one, I think just starting with, look, like I'm setting, and this goes with any limit, whether it's getting your first phone or whether it's, look, I'm taking your phone away at 8 p.m. and you can get it back after school or whatever you're doing at home. For one, just sharing with kids, and they don't always hear it at this age, like, I'm doing this because I care about you. I'm doing this because, like, based on, as a parent, it's up to me to take in as much information as I can through my lived experience and through what I can learn from places where I can learn things, and try to set you up to have the most successful future, emotionally, physically, just general success-wise, and in my opinion, you'll be better off with having this limit, and you don't need it. And kids can't, as I'm saying this, my 11-year-old would be like, no, but I just want a phone. So the answer is, you're not getting a phone now, and and guess what, and does it make parenting harder in some ways? Maybe at times, yeah. Like if my kid wants to connect with a friend, I need to have them over for a play date, which is fine. That's what I want. I want my kids to.
Unless the other kid has a phone. And then they sit there and watch the game together. That's like,
so my son got invited to a sleepover birthday party a month ago, and it was a text invite, come celebrate so-and-so's birthday party, sleepover, no personal devices, please. and it was an awesome birthday party, you know? So it's a matter of like, you know, it's a matter of us, you know, starting to do that, you know, like for me, like with my kids, you know, like if they're going over to someone's house and let's say it's somebody that I know, like they kind of have just like unmonitored use of the internet, like I'll tell the parents, I'll be like, look, like, just so you know, like it's totally, you know, my rules. I may be archaic, haha, but I don't let my kid on the internet like unsupervised, you know, for, you know, especially like at a sleepover type situation, you know, and so and parents typically respect that. So they don't always understand, but I can tell you, I also know kids who are older now, who are young adults, and who are thanking their parents for not getting me that phone, because they feel like they have a richer life. So, again, I'm not gonna, you know, are my kids going to have smartphones at some point? Of course, you know, like, and you know, it's up to all of us to kind of figure out like what we're most comfortable with. I'll also just admit that, like, you know, due to the nature of the work that I do, I'm probably more cautious than the average parent, because I've seen sometimes when things go really poorly with social media and internet use and whatnot. So it's a personal decision, but just the fact that, you know, the fact that you're all here, the fact that you're asking these questions show that we're in a good spot.
Have you heard as a psychologist that children with ADHD are sometimes calmed or soothed by video games, so that it can be a good thing for them? Because I know when my kids were in like middle school, we had some family issues, and my daughter, who really at that time only had like Game Boy type things, but convinced the psychologist that it was the only way that she could cope with, you know, with what was going on. And the psychologist came out and told me that, and I went, she is like bluffing you. Let me tell you, she does not need these things. And she was such an outdoor girl before that stuff started coming into our house. Now my son had ADHD really, really badly. She was not diagnosed. She hasn't ever been diagnosed. But now looking back as a young adult, she's like, I'm pretty sure I have it too, you know. But that's what I was told by the counselor, that it would probably be good to let them do this because it soothed them.
Yeah, so I mean, every case is individual. I can tell you as a blanket statement, I don't recommend video games for ADHD. You know, now that being said, you know, are video games bad? No. You know, in moderation, can they be fine? Yeah. I mean, I was a Nintendo kid, I'll admit. That being said, Nintendo games had a clear beginning and end, you know, and you couldn't be bullied by others on Nintendo, etc. But even like today's video games, I mean, I think it's just really important to make sure that, it's gonna sound silly, we wanna make sure our kids are playing the games and the games aren't playing them. You know, and so that's what's most important. But I don't believe in that, like, for instance, like, oh, you know, if you only increase so and so's video game usage, that will help them with X or Y. That's typically not the case. Now, could you make an argument that, like, you know, kids deserve a break and kids deserve a pleasurable activity that is not doing them harm? Sure. Good question.
After I saw that movie, The Social Dilemma, though, I had a whole different outlook on the way things are made to control us and to control our responses to things. So, but I found also trying to go back and find that movie again on the internet was extremely hard. After you'd seen it once, I saw it once, and then I went back and tried to recommend it to other people and could not find it. So I don't know if it was taken off or what the deal was, but I don't know if it's available in a different way. But I would highly recommend for people to watch it. It's not long.
Yeah, so you're referring to a movie, The Social Dilemma. I feel like it's a really nice movie to watch, and it talks about these algorithms actually in depth, and it actually interviews a lot of people who helped, who were early employees of these companies. It's a good movie. It speaks to the addiction piece for sure. It is. I forget if it's available on Amazon Prime or Netflix, but likely one of them.
don't access your slideshow. So I just think this is really important information for parents. And so working here in a school, I would love to give this to a greater audience. So if someone wanted to access your slideshow, how could they do that for resources?
You could email me,
Okay.
or probably email Ed Joe or anybody from NCSS. and
Okay.
Happy to share. I should put a disclaimer, these are the views of me and not of NCSS. In case anything's deemed controversial, I'll add that before I share it with everybody.
Also a big thing with kids is having a conversation with them about how they communicate with others online, because it's like you get behind a keyboard or a screen and you not having to be face to face with somebody makes it very easy to say things that can be very harmful and you can't take back. And I see this a lot in my work of kids easily saying things that can be very hurtful and something they would never dream of saying to the person's face. And just like, so having those conversations with the kids, with your child constantly, and how their actions have impacts on other people. And also, like, I also see like a lot where we're talking to kids and about something that's happened and it's come into school, and we're like, well, should we talk to this person about it? Like, oh no, they don't even have a phone. They're not on that Snapchat group. So like, just how some students just aren't even involved in some of this stuff because they just don't have it. It kind of saves them in a way of being pulled into harmful things like harassment or bullying.
Yeah, you brought up a lot of good comments there. Yeah, one, I think it's really important for us to teach our younger people that, you know, not to, and just we teach ourselves, don't, it's one thing to say something impulsively. You can shrug it off, you can add context. But if you type something impulsively, I mean, people lose jobs for it all the time. People lose friends for it. Even like, I mean, let's face it, like, take eighth graders. Eighth graders say horrible, horrible things. All the, like, dreadful, horrible things. Like, it's one thing to say it, and then it can be a he said, she said. Did she really say that? Did you? Oh, no, I didn't. It's another thing to type it and have the screenshot shared. And next thing you know, your kid is kicked out of school for a week and they're seeing me because they want to kill themselves. Like, it's all the difference is say, talking versus typing, or talking if somebody's recording something. You meant another thing you mentioned is Snapchat, which I'm a relative Luddite. I've never used Snapchat, but the one thing that other educators have told me is that it's almost as if Snapchat was created for bullying. There's something about that app that allows for certain people to be brought into certain conversations and then kind of bullied without, and then other people let go so they can't see what's going on. Again, I don't know the details. I should do more research on this, but I had a principal tell me that a huge percentage of the emotional issues they were dealing with and behavioral issues they were dealing with were due to that app in particular, for whatever it's worth. So good points.
The girls with comparing themselves to others too was a huge detriment in our family. It just, when people say to me, you know, when did your family start going downhill? And I'm like, when she got her first phone. Like really, when people say, you know, oh, my daughter wants a phone, I'm like, don't do it. I mean, I don't care how old they are. Just from my personal experience, I just go, you know, because I know what I went through as a teenager.
That's a really good, brings up another really good point, is that, people can create these fake lives. Like whether it's an influencer or even just another high school student. Like some high school student will take 1,000 pictures of themselves in 1,000 different poses with different lighting and then select the one they think looks perfect, post that like, oh, I just got out of bed, feeling good. And it makes everyone else be like, oh gosh, like, I don't look like this person. And now you can use filters, you can use AI to make people like look better and make them seem like they're doing more exciting things. And yeah, it's just, it just literally creates anxiety. And unfortunately, anxiety increases one's use of the devices. comments, questions?
So is that proposed bill, is it making an exception for state testing? Because state testing requires the use of Chromebooks.
That's a great question. If that's how we do state testing, then hopefully, you know, and hopefully again, I'll admit, I'm selfish in this. I think about my kids and like, when my kid's taking an important test, I hope he's not permitted to have ESPN.com open in the same thing, you know, like, forget it. Like, so hopefully, I'm not anti-technology per se. I'm anti the distraction. So, yeah.
Have you had any experience with positive ways that the internet and social media have been used between, parents and teenage students specifically?
Great question. The answer is definitely. The internet is also an amazing force of good in many ways. I'm a physician, take medicine. There are medical advances being made at a much higher rate now due to technology, due to people being able to access research done across the world, being able for algorithms to help, find case studies that were similar to each other. So that's an example in medicine. But as far as, humans go, they're like, let's say, there's something about you, maybe an interest you have that nobody else shares, or maybe even like an ailment that you have that nobody else shares. Being able to connect with somebody else that also has that can be powerful to know we're not alone. For instance, telemedicine, teletherapy, group therapy, parent management groups. It used to be that if, let's say, you lived somewhere rural, you couldn't get care for your kids. You couldn't find that support group. Now you can. Yes. I don't want to make it seem like it's all doom and gloom with technology. It's also like is amazing, in so many ways as well. So thank you for pointing that out.
Well, just I didn't know if there was any specific things that you found that have been really helpful for that teenage crew with their parents.
I have a colleague named Dr. Elizabeth Hunt. She's a pediatrician in South Burlington, and I know she's working on. She and a team of people are working on specifically that, like, what are things we can put out there that are really kind of just positive, affirming, so that when kids are online, you meet them when they're there, and help them kind of in more pro-social ways.
So in your line of work over the past couple of years, do you see a gender difference? Is it more girls or boys struggling? And then what has been the biggest increase, like age-wise, that you've seen anxiety or mental health?
I see it in both. I think probably, so females mentally, I think, mature at a higher rate than males, and so I think that I see females get in trouble earlier. Take 5th, 6th grade, you maybe have a higher percentage of females that are more self-aware and more aware of the world, and maybe a relatively higher percentage of males that are just, interested in the next kickball game. And so with that, that's a blessing and a curse, and I think that's one of the reasons why teenage girls suffer more. So I see it a bit more in girls than boys, but it's pretty darn even. And your next question was, like, at what age are you seeing middle school, high school, is still tops. 5th grade, I see a lot of the behavioral problems as early as kindergarten, 1st, 2nd grade, and really, it's oftentimes in kids where maybe parents have used screens as a way to pacify, maybe due to just anger issues in the child or anxiety issues in the child or whatever, and then it's trying to take them away, and then that can severely worsen outcomes. And then also, let's face it, screen addicted parents. If we have it's hard enough to be a parent when we're present. when we're not totally there, can bring its own issues, and kids can act out and react to that.
I don't know if you can corroborate this, but so I heard that the way humans, compare themselves is that they only compare themselves to the people next to them, generally not to the whole world. So if you're doing as well as the people next to you, you're happy. If you're the only one in the village, that then you're depressed. The challenge with Instagram and things like that is that the person next to you then becomes the whole world, and so you're now compared, and so you'll be depressed forever. And then another thing I have a question. I did hear that Instagram is one of the worst for young girls because of that factor where everything is filtered and everything. I don't know if you have the same info.
You're totally right. I want to address that first comment, and it's when you think about it, for as long as there have been humans, we've been in towns, tribes, maybe just street, road, and when you have a smaller number, like everyone's generally like good at something, has a positive trait, like I can outwork this person, like I can hit this free throw, I get feeling good about myself, I can make this cake that people value and like. And then you compare yourself and you got like, oh, well, this person in South Dakota, they won like the cake making award in their town. What are you doing? Or like, oh, this person's going pro at age 17. What are you doing? And you're totally right. And so it can decrease, it can put a lid on some of the highs that people get as far as self-affirmation goes. So you're totally right. It's too much comparison. Other questions, thoughts?
Just one thing that, when you hear about stories with kids committing suicide, that they've been bullied and whatnot, the first thought that I have is, if you've been bullied electronically, why don't you just disconnect and get rid of your phone, get rid of your accounts? I get that, if it's in the same school, you still have to be in the hallway and whatnot, but does that, why isn't that such a simple thing to put in place?
That's a great question, and it comes down to the addiction. Is that, if you go online one time, you're playing your first game, and people are acting mean, you're out of there. Like, you're like, whatever, like this is done. But it's when I see kids, and I know adults, and I'm sure we all do, where that is their life. Like, their entire life is Fortnite. That's where they eat all their meals. That's where they have all of their friends. I can't tell you how many kids I've met where it's like, oh, how are things with friends? Good. Oh yeah, so-and-so, my girlfriend. Do any of them live in the state? No. Have you ever met them in person? No. So this becomes, and that's an extreme example, but these games or social media becomes their whole life, and they're invested in it, and they wake up and that's, I just need to check, and they're doing it. And so then the bullying starts happening, it's like, well, they don't know another way to live. And they'll do anything to try to make it work. It's like being in an abusive relationship where logically it's bad, but you just want to continue to try to make it right. So it's really sad.
And now that gaming has a payday to it, people can make money now, which only adds to that, I would guess. The desire to be successful.
You're totally right, and not just gaming, but being on social media. You have all these social media influencers, and the reality is, the odds are incredibly low to make any real money doing any of those things. But you're right, it's akin to gambling. So I want to get positive here. I do think things are shifting in the right direction. I really do. Just based on a lot of the things that I showed, and just based on the fact that we're all here, I don't think 10 years ago, when this was starting, you know, people just thought it was all good. And now, I mean, gosh, I mean, you know, the state of Vermont is considering a bill. The country is considering a bill. Or, you know, the country is considering banning, I'm not gonna say whether, you know, I don't wanna get political, but the country is considering banning a social media, a very popular social media device that that they think is like harming society. Like, so it's getting real. And I think that, and also it makes it a lot easier for us as parents to say, hey, I'm not just doing this because like I grew up under a rock. I'm doing this because of this. Like, there are studies, you know, I can show you why I don't want you online all night. I can show you why I want you to get outside here and there, not be on your device all the time. And so the pendulum is shifting. I think it's going to, you know, it's going to really help our kids in a lot of ways. I'm friends with a lot of educators, and I know a lot of educators have felt demoralized because they felt like, you know, I'm used to like kids being really engaged, either positive or negative. But it's demoralizing when maybe you try and teach a class and every kid's on their phone and not paying attention. Like, in some ways it's easier. You maybe have less, you know, severe disruptions, but you know, like, you know, what you're trying to teach isn't getting absorbed as much. And so all these things I think are on the path to improvement societally. So any other questions, thoughts? All right, well, I think it was about an hour. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.